the 30s. Once you're into the 40s, there's other people, but I didn't really focus on that.
That's Bob K. Author of Key Players in AA History. I don't see Elizabeth here, so we have started recording. Elizabeth is not here yet. But no worries. We'll crack on. So I'm just going to do a short intro. Howard, we kind of like to say a little, get into the mood of things. People might be coming from work or something like that. Just have a little moment. And so we just put up this a version of the set-aside prayer. And we kind of say that together if you'd like. If you want to join in, of course. So using God as you do, don't, whatever, understand. God, please help me to set aside everything I think I know with an open mind for a new understanding. Amen. And for those of us who are on the other side of the fence, or whatever you used to call it, we say this one. So may I seek the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And we just think of the alcoholics who are still suffering from alcoholism, of course, and other illnesses. And of course, we're thinking of their family members. Right, so here we go. So I'm just going to do this little intro. We got a guy by the name of Howard Owen, hopefully I can say that. A presentation he's going to do for us tonight is on TiVo and the alcoholic ego. And I just want to read this because I think it's a fantastic read. This is from Alcoholics Anonymous, Comes of Age, page 311. This is what Harry Tiebout said. Characteristic of the so-called typical alcoholic is a narcissistic, egocentric core, dominated by feelings of omnipotence, intent on maintaining at all costs its inner integrity. He said, while these characteristics are found in other maladjustments, they appear in relatively pure culture in alcoholic after alcoholic. And he goes on to say that, inwardly, the alcoholic brooks no control from man or God. He, the alcoholic, is and must be the master of his destiny. So, Howard, I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say about that one in particular, but also his relationship with Bill Wilson. So thank you for agreeing to do this. Appreciate it. So over to you in Charlotte. You're in Charlotte. Is that North
Carolina.
North Carolina. Thank you, Howard. Appreciate it.
You bet. Hi, my name's Howard. I'm an alcoholic and complete layman. I have no psychiatric training. I have no historical training. What I've got is my own experience and a lot of I belong to my home group is the Primetime is Now Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that fellowship reads Harry Tiebout as part of our literature and incorporates it in our approach to alcoholism. And Harry Tiebout was a psychiatrist. He was active from 1922 until his death in 1966. He was a lifelong friend of AA. He was Bill Wilson's psychiatrist in the 1940s and a member of the AA board from 1957 to 1966. He was an early proponent of the disease theory of alcoholism. He wasn't alone in this. There were others, of course, that were involved, but he was an early proponent. He's mentioned in the big books. Appendix 3's got a short blurb about alcoholism in there, the medical view on alcoholism. He's on, as we noted, alcohol AA Comes of Age, and Appendix E:B. And there's also, that paper is also online separately. Let's see, chat. Chat. Do I have chat? Yeah, I got chat. So I'll paste that URL in here. That's a PDF version of his paper that was published in 1944, his first paper on alcoholism, and it's a very important one to understand his context. This was his first view of AA. And in it, in the version on AA Comes of Age, he talks about Mr. X. That has changed in this copy because Bill Wilson is dead now, so we can use his name. And Mr. X is Bill Wilson, he had extensive discussions with Bill about how AA worked, and they informed his first paper. It's password protected for copyright reasons. The password is Tivo. And we read that first blurb about the narcissistic egocentric core, dominated by feelings of omnipotence, intended on maintaining at all costs its inner integrity. There was something after the pure culture. After the pure culture statement, he talks about Silman, another researcher, and he reported he felt he could discern the outlines of a common character structure among problem drinkers, and that the best terms he could find for this group of qualities noted was defiant individuality and grandiosity. So inwardly, the alcoholic brooks no control from man or God. He, the alcoholic, must be master of his destiny, who will fight to the end and preserve this position. So that's his first description of ego. He doesn't call it that, but that's the first published description of Tiebo's idea of what's in the way of the recovery of the alcoholic that I can find. It goes on there and talks about how the religious factor works. It says, granting then the more or less constant presence of these character traits, is easy to see how the person possessing them has difficulty in accepting God and religion. Religion, by its demand that an individual acknowledge the presence of a God, challenges the very nature of the alcoholic. But on the other hand, and this point is basic to my paper, if the alcoholic can truly accept the presence of a power greater than himself, he, by that very step, modifies, at least temporarily and possibly permanently, his deepest inner structure, and when he does so without resentment or struggle, then he is no longer typically alcoholic. And here he's describing his first pass at the concept of surrender, which ended up being very important to him in his later writings and studies. So before we talk about how he approached ego, we have to talk about this is the journey he went through in understanding about the ego. He started to look at surrender because he saw that as being, the step one surrender. Admitted we're powerless over alcohol. Their lives become unmanageable. He saw that as crucial to a early success in keeping people with the plug in the jug. And he, at that point, hadn't looked beyond that to the question of maintaining sobriety. But the fact that AA could get people to stop drinking was quite notable to him. I should probably also relate the story of Marty Mann. In 1939, Dr. Tiebo came across. He was the medical director at Blythewood Hospital in Connecticut, and he that treated psychiatric patients and alcoholics. And he had a patient, Marty Mann, who later rose to prominence in AA, the National Council on Alcoholism, and had a long career in AA and alcoholic treatment, was one of his patients, and he was getting nowhere with her. And he ran across a preprint of Alcoholics Anonymous and read it and said that he recognized some of the character traits that he was dealing with in his patient in the description in the book. So presumably we're talking about 62, 63, selfishness, self-centeredness that we think is the root of our troubles, and et cetera. And however that may be, he gave the book to Marty Mann, who there are several accounts of how that went. Tiebo says that she accepted it and went to AA, but apparently Marty Mann's biographer said that she had a violent reaction against the religious element. And Bill W. in his preface to the PDF that I'll post later says that Marty threw the book out the window when she first got it. But she eventually picked it up again and ended up going to AA. And Thibault saw this transformation in her, because she'd undergone a surrender. And he, and before all of this stuff that we quoted, he said something had happened under my very nose that he couldn't explain. So he looked at it and he said, well, we've got this ego structure. He didn't call it ego at that point. And we have had a surrender. So those are the two elements that he clued into early, and that is reflected in that first paper. Also from this first paper on alcoholism, in other words, in light of Mr. Wilson's own experience, a religious or spiritual awakening is the act of giving up one's reliance on one's omnipotence. The defiant individuality no longer defies, but accepts help, guidance, and control from the outside, and the individual relinquishes his negative, aggressive feelings toward himself and toward life. He finds himself overwhelmed by strongly positive ones, such as love, friendliness, peacefulness, and pervading contentment, which state is the exact antithesis of the former restlessness and irritability. And the significant fact is that when this new mental state of the individual is no longer, with this new mental state, the individual is no longer literally driven to drink. Now, this is like the initial surrender and flying up to the pink cloud he's discussing here. Later, he would call this the positive phase that results from the release of tension, of giving up the battle, and suddenly having all that extra energy that was left over from fighting the drink. Okay, so we move on to another paper that he wrote called Anonymity, the Ego Reducer. And he discusses surrender in that paper. And I'm going to give you a URL to a study guide that contains all the material that's in the Harry Thibault book, but also some extra stuff that we've added. And when I give page numbers here, it will be with reference to that PDF. That one is not password protected. So the miracle of AA was now a little clearer. For reasons still obscure, the program and the fellowship of AA could induce a surrender, which could in turn lead to a period of no drinking. Still questing eagerly, I shifted my therapeutic attack. The job was now to induce surrender. When I tried to cause that, I ran into a whole nest of resistances to the idea, totally new territory to be explored. As I continued my tour, it became ever more apparent that in everyone's psyche there existed an unconquerable ego that bitterly opposed any thought of defeat. Until that ego was somehow reduced or rendered ineffective, no likelihood of surrender could be anticipated. And that's on page 11 to 12 on the reference PDF. Moving on. Okay. So that's Anonymity, the Ego Reducer. I'm moving on to another paper, The Act of Surrender in the Therapeutic Process with Special Reference to Alcoholism. And let's see. There's a Wikipedia page, by the way, on Thibault that's pretty good. And I'll post that right here. So I get dates from that page on the papers, plus other tidbits that I hadn't actually read before, so it was useful. So the paper I'm looking for is Therapeutic Process. So that's 19 sorry, Therapeutic Mechanisms is 1944. I'm sorry, don't have the date.
Sure.
So in the act of surrender in the therapeutic process with special reference to alcoholism, he says, with respect to the act of surrender, let me emphasize this point. It is an unconscious event, not willed by the patient, even if he or she should desire to do so. It can occur only when an individual's certain traits in his or her unconscious mind becomes involved in a certain set of circumstances. Then the act of surrender can be anticipated with considerable accuracy. As I shall soon show, it cannot be defined in direct conscious terminology, but must be understood in all its unconscious ramifications, or its true meaning can be glimpsed. So now this is a theme that Thibault carries on throughout his work, that the act of surrender is an unconscious. The way I think of that is that's a change of heart. It's not a change of mind. It's a genuine change in my soul or my heart that constitutes a real surrender. But he also says that the ego is in the unconscious, that the ego is a feeling state, that it's and that's in the unconscious, and you may be aware of it at a conscious level, but it operates at the unconscious level. So direct attacks with the mind are likely to fail because they're not actually dealing at the level at which this thing operates. So Thibault draws a distinction between surrender and submission. In submission, an individual accepts reality consciously but not unconsciously. He or she accepts as a practical fact that he or she cannot at that moment lick reality, but lurking in the unconscious is the feeling that there will come a day, which implies no real acceptance and demonstrates conclusively that the struggle is still on. With submission, which is at best is a superficial yielding, tension continues. In surrender, the ability to accept reality functions on the unconscious level, and there's no residual of battle. Relaxation with freedom from strain and conflict ensue. So Thibault devotes an entire paper to this subject called Surrender versus Compliance in Therapy, and it's available in the PDF. So now we talked about surrender, and it's an unconscious act. It's required to get rid of ego. So now we can start talking about ego. And he published a pivotal paper called The Ego Factors in Surrender and Alcoholism in 1954 in the Quarterly Journal of Studies of Alcohol. It's aimed at a professional audience of psychiatrists, so it's a bit technical. And he starts off with the technical discussion of the word ego. Ego has a special meaning in Freudian psychology, Freudian psychodynamics, which you don't need to understand because, I'm sure many of you do, but you don't need to, because what he says is that he's using the term in its commonplace meaning. And he explains that the expression he has an inflated ego is self-explanatory. It evokes the picture of a pompous, self-important, strutting individual whose inferiorities are masked by a surface assurance. Such a person appears thick-skinned, insensitive, nearly impervious to the existence of others, a completely self-centered individual who plows unthinkingly through life, intent on gathering unto himself all the comforts and satisfactions available. He's generally considered the epitome of selfishness, and there the matter rests. And that seems to me to accord pretty well with the Big Book description of the selfishness of an alcoholic. Thibault says that in his paper he'll use the big E with ego to distinguish this from the technical use of the Freudian. So anyway, This is the ego factors in surrender and alcoholism, and it's also in the PDF that I posted. So he presents his conclusion before his argument and says that the big E ego is made up of the persisting elements in the adult psyche of the original nature of the child. And he says there are three factors which should receive mention. The first is, as Freud observed in his priceless phase, His Majesty the Baby, that the infant is born ruler of all he surveys. He comes from the nirvana of the womb, where he is usually the sole occupant, and he clings to that omnipotence with an innocence, yet determination which baffles parent after parent. The second, stemming directly from the monarch within, is that the infant tolerates frustration poorly and lets the world know it readily. The third significant aspect of the child's original psyche is its tendency to do everything in a hurry. So that gives us three so-called ego factors. One, a feeling of omnipotence or being all-powerful. Two, always in a hurry, rushing around. And three, an inability to accept frustration. So the way I frame that for my own case is that I think I can do anything that I set my mind to, and I set at it at a rapid pace, and then I run into a wall that reality puts up, and it hurts like hell, and I can't accept it, and I drink. That's the way I think of that. And I went through that syndrome quite a bit. I was pretty well bruised and bloodied by hitting walls that reality seemingly put in my way, but they were just there and I didn't see them coming. So he goes on, preliminary to this discussion, the conclusion was offered that the ego is a residual of the initial feeling life of the infant. It should be evident that the immaturity characteristically found in the makeup of the alcoholic is a persistence of the original state of the child. In connection with the description of the manifestations which denote a large and active ego, it should be recalled that the presence in the unconscious of such ego forces may be quite out of reach of conscious observation. Only through the acting and feeling of the individual can their existence be suspected. Now the first answer to the first question raised herein, namely what part of the alcoholic must surrender, is obvious. It is the ego element. So there's the bottom line. Surrender is required to get on with sobriety, and what stands in the way of surrender is ego. So Thibault defines ego as the block to progress for the alcoholic. And he says that you can't compromise with ego. You can't say, I'll reduce it a little bit. You need to try to get rid of it. And we're talking about the infantile ego, the persisting infantile. Everyone needs the ego to be healthy. But we're talking about these ego factors and the syndrome of the undisciplined, underdeveloped, childlike ego of the alcoholic. So he says, like Freud, Radeau, another researcher he refers to, thinks only in terms of reduction. The need for the complete elimination of ego is a stand they cannot bring themselves to assume. Hence, they unwittingly advocate the retention of some infantile traits with no clear awareness that they're trading with the devil. The ego, no matter how carefully safeguarded, merely keeps him alive, and likely at any occasion to erupt full force into action. There can be no successful compromise with ego, a fact not sufficiently appreciated by many, if not most, therapists. So there he starts with another theme that he keeps up throughout his career, which is that the ego is resilient, that this alcoholic ego will return without continuous work. Now, as I said, I've got no training as a doctor, neurologist, psychiatrist, or anything like this, but I have a way I explain it to myself, which involves neuroplasticity, which is the idea that nerve cells in the brain can rewire themselves. You get a damage. Some people who have strokes and have speech aphasia problems can learn to speak again, and the way they do that is by the brain reconnecting the regions that have been damaged, and so they build new wiring. And the way I think of the process of AA, in physical terms, not in experiential terms, but in terms of what's going on physically, is that my old wiring is all screwed up. I'm I have this ego. I have everything Harry Tiebout tells me I've got, and I recognize it and I relate to it. That plus a lot more having to do with the spiritual side of AA. But I can learn I can get a new character by working the steps. I can, by having a reorientation through step 1, 2, and 3, then I can take the work to do a 4th step and 5th step to understand what's really going on, and then engage in a reconstruction of my external life and my internal life, what's going on in my brain, so that I have a rebuilding of my neural networks. And I behave differently. I think differently. I have a different consciousness. But the difficulty is that the old wiring never goes away, and that I can at any moment wake up in the old pattern, and I can be challenged in some way. My ego rises up and says, I've got to take care of this. And it's on. I'm doing my thing. And I have to be very aware of what's going on with that. And the way I do it is with a God consciousness. And just to me, that means that I'm separate, back away from my thoughts, where I can see my thoughts, where I can see my thought processes, and see that, oh, that's the old pattern. And then personally, I do a prayer to say, God, please help me. But there are lots of ways to deal with the awareness, right? The awareness alone isn't enough. You need some sort of process to treat it, to help change the thinking. And for me, that works in a quasi-religious way with this idea of God. It's I'm not denominational or anything, but that's just me personally. But the way I see it is that we have this space, which is the essence of a spiritual experience, where we can back away and see. And at that point, we can go into the new wiring and energize that and cut the pathways deeper, and it makes it better. So that was a little bit of a riff in the middle of my presentation. Sorry about that. The second question raised here is, how does the surrender reaction change the inner psychic picture? The question is based on a presupposition, namely that surrender is an emotional step in which the ego, at least for the time being, acknowledges that it is no longer supreme. This acknowledgement is valueless if it is limited to consciousness. It must be accompanied by similar feelings of the unconscious. For the alcoholic, surrender is marked by the admission of being powerless over alcohol. His sobriety has that quality of peace and tranquility, which makes for a lasting quiet within, only if surrender is effective in the unconscious and permanent as well. And then I really didn't get time to pull out references to the ego resurgence, but here's one from a talk he gave in 1965, I think, for an AA convention. And he talks about an alcoholic who confesses to a friend that he fears that he's suffering from halitosis, and which basically means that he's a candidate for sainthood. And the problem is his ego is returning. And Thibault notes the individual enters AA after hitting bottom, has his own experience, which provides him with a genuine feeling of humility. Then a tragic thing often happens. The memory lingers, but the humility slowly seeps away. Finally, the individual is back in the memory of being humble, but his ego has staged a comeback without his having the slightest awareness of the truth. When the comeback has occurred, the individual can get up and say, in all sincerity, I'm the most humble man in the room. So, that's halitosis is a occupational hazard for alcoholics. It is certainly for me. So I need a daily practice to stay aware, stay in touch, and I do that with a semi-religious approach. But basically, my idea, for what it's worth, is that there are lots of approaches that allow for this sort of therapy to take place inside one's mind. A lot of them are spiritually based. I know people who've done this without any hint of supernatural or spiritual approach, although I can't imagine how they do it, but I'm told that they do, and external evidence seems to prove it. So, I always run short. I don't run short on time. I run long. Let's say I run long on time and short on material. So, that's all the notes I had prepared. I could talk a lot more about this if you have questions.
Brilliant. Yes, we're looking forward to that. That's a nice introduction. Thank you. We'll have to get you back and do some other time. But let's unmute yourselves and we're here for Howard. And thank you, everyone. You can unmute.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you, Howard.
Thanks heaps, Howard.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And just to let you know what we have, I think Rob's put in the chat already, but next week we're back. Lynn S is coming back to us next Friday, and we're finishing off the 12 traditions. She's been taking us through the traditions from a historical perspective from her book on What Slender Threads, historical perspective of the traditions. This Sunday, Rob, we have Bill Shabergs with us.
We do, and we're going to be doing chapter 16. Meanwhile, out in Akron, I won't read it now. I've read it twice today, so
right. Okay.
and this tomorrow, Fitz Mayo. We've been publicizing this for about a month and a half now. Jim Worley's going to be doing a presentation on Fitz Mayo, and that's going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow afternoon. So,
if you want more information about these, they're on the website. But also, Rob has been putting them in the chat for you. But Rob, We've got Eamon. I don't know if Eamon is still here.
Yeah, he wasn't here earlier. And then on Sunday, right after writing the big book, when our meeting ends, Eamon's meeting is usually starting. His is at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time also. And Jim Kay, who has 43 years of sobriety, will be speaking. That's incredible.
And we finished with this one, yeah.
Okay, Grateful to have been there, which is on Sunday, and that is at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I believe they are on week 3 or week 4, and Grateful to have been there, the Nell Wynn book. So it's a great time to jump in and become involved. Great book.
Thank you for that. And we did go through Harry Thibault's writings, and we did record them. So they're on the website. We went through his book, and we recorded that. So if you want more information about surrender and submission, and it's fantastic. It's very insightful. But finally, I think I put this one up because I think it really helps me understand a lot of things, how it works. Everybody is a genius. And the guy says, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. And so you've got a monkey, you've got a penguin, you've got an elephant, you've got a goldfish, you've got a dog and a seal. So who's going to win that? Who's going to be the smartest guy in the room there? But thank God AA is not like that at all. we don't buy into that nonsense in Alcoholics Anonymous. So here you go. We're Q&A. We're at Q&A. Howard, I love that. I love your natural approach, dude. Your own personal experience is wonderful stuff. Thank you. I have a question, but if no one else wants to come in, I think I will ask you the question. If no one else has got their hand up. Yeah, I'll just kick it off. So Thibault was in Brightwood in 35, I think, and Marty Mann got the book in 39. So would Wilson have read anything on Thibault, or was it Thibault influenced by Wilson with regards to alcoholism? I know he was working in Brightwood.
I believe it was the latter. The preprint brought Bill Wilson to Thibault's attention, and he sought him out. And he, in that first paper, he says that Mr. X's insights were invaluable. And they had long conversations with Bill to try to understand the program. And that first paper is really worth reading. If you've got a copy of AA Comes of Age, or if you want to look at that PDF, it really does frame what he does later, and shows that he had a full understanding of AA as it was there in 1939. He really understood the spiritual element. A lot of times you won't hear him talk about the spiritual element in his papers for other professionals. He's familiar with that on his talks to alcoholics, but the first paper makes it clear that he completely understood the spiritual angle.
Thank you, Howard. So Wilson wouldn't have known anything about Harry Thibault prior to the 1939.
I don't think so. I have no knowledge that
you haven't come across anything which says any different than that.
No.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Aisley's coming in from Atlanta.
Hey, David. Hello, everyone. Azel, Real Alcoholic. Thank you for your presentation, Howard. Would you happen to have at your disposal any of the research methodology that supports the theories that you've been speaking about?
Thibault includes clinical histories in some of his papers. I didn't present any of that, but he does have case studies that he talks about. I'm not sure that would really pass muster for a research project today or not. Like I say, I'm not a professional, so I don't know.
Sure.
But if you read the papers, he generally does. He doesn't merely theorize. He talks about clinical experience.
Yeah, and does he give you the group compositions?
No. He's not doing large studies. He's talking about individual patients. So he interviews a lot of patients, but there's no organized study on that. I think others have done that kind of work, but
yeah. So in other words, it's not necessarily statistically significant, the things that he comes up with, except for to a small population, possibly.
Yeah, well, they're a pre-selected group, AA members, alcoholics, and certainly you can't draw the kinds of conclusions that you can get from a large research study from his individual experience. This is mostly his experience and his insights. And, they seem valuable to me because I use them in my own life, and they seem to be working pretty good.
Okay.
Thank you, Azel. Stick around. We have the meeting after the meeting, as you know, Azel. Good stuff. Thank you. Patrick is coming in next. Patrick, I think in Boston.
I'm sure that I believe it's in the 12 and 12 when they talk about the evaluation of the alcoholics and looking to say that they were the greatest thing since sliced bread, that somebody went ahead and said they were childish and immature. I'm sure that must have been, go back to Thibault. I remember early on that thing, King Baby, the petulancy of the alcoholic. And go to enough meetings, and he was pretty much on base. I mean, I don't think you need a thesis to go ahead and to prove it. I mean, thank God, and we would be waiting around at the College of Cardinals would probably have to edit it to death. But I think he was on to something by his observations. So was he the one that said that basically gave that the origin to that alcoholics are childish and self-centered, etc.?
Well, he was not influential in the language in the Big Book, but however, by the time the 12 by 12 was written, Bill was well acquainted with Thibault and had undergone therapy with him. And so one can infer that, yeah, it was probably very influential. I think Bill uses the word ego in the 12 by 12, and the only reference you get in the Big Book is sorry, it's distracting. The only reference you get in the Big Book is that our actor is egocentric, as they like to call it nowadays. But that's just a matter of terminology. The Big Book talks about selfishness, self-centeredness, I think, in equivalent terms. But yeah, I think the 12 by 12 was quite influenced by Harry Thibault.
Patrick, you good?
No, that's all I had. I just had my comment.
So you're saying there is Harry Thibault Wilson was in conversation when he was writing the 12 by 12 with Harry Thibault. He would have been in discussion with him.
I would imagine it would be a consensus of any of the psychologists that were dealing with us at the time. To be able all of us see them in a room and realize that the grandiosity, etc., we don't have to be drunk to have that. That might be one of the conditions to doing it. But I mean, I think that it gave them a petri dish to go ahead and look at. And that's why they put it together.
Howard? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure he was in direct consultation with Thibault while he wrote the book. I just know that he was well aware of Thibault and I'm
talking about the 12 and 12. That's what I'm concerned with.
Right. I'm sorry, 12 and 12. That's right. I'm not sure that he was in.
No, I was asking Patrick. I was asking Howard, was Wilson in discussion or conversation? Did he sit down and talk to Harry when he was writing the 12 by 12?
He was at the time in the 40s, correct?
Yes, he was. I'm not sure the exact dates of his therapy, but it was roughly contemporaneous with the 12 by 12.
And the 12 and 12 came out in the early 50s, so.
Yeah, so they may not have been talking at that particular time, but Bill Wilson was very well acquainted with Thibault and his ideas.
And how long was he I'm throwing questions at you now. Well, how long was he, because you're triggering off this at me, how long was he in counselling, if that's what you call it, or in therapy with Harry Thibault Wilson?
I'm not sure.
You don't know exactly. No worries. We can find that information out, I'm sure. Kenny Mack is waiting there. Thanks, Kenny.
Yeah, a couple of different things. First of all, just with the discussion going on, that you can kind of tell that they were kind of, speaking on good terms for a period of time. And then there came a point of friction between the two. And, I think I listened to another presentation not too long ago about, Thibault, and it had to do with the balance in the foundation or the general service office, and the balance between, non-alcoholic and alcoholic, trustees. So, and Harry Thibault wouldn't let us. And so we had, he made us prove, or made Bill prove that, hey. And so finally that occurred. But, no, a couple of different observations, and I've kind of had my opinions about him. And so lately I'm like, do I want to come to this presentation or not? Because mine are not really positive. And mine come from, when I was a newcomer, I read There's King Baby that Patrick was just talking about. And then here's one of it's called The Ego Factors in Surrender and Alcoholism. So, and so I'd read those in the back of my mind, and I don't know, this is my question, does anybody else kind of get the difference that, hey, Harry, don't you have an ego too? And kind of like when you confront him, you're like, no, I don't have an ego. And that's what the whole discussion was about today, that's how the ego functions. And to me, it's not just we alcoholics who have egos. The whole human population does. And so, yeah, we put us in a petri dish because we come into these meetings and we're honest and open about it. How many places do you go in the world where you're out there? If we shared in the open world, like, at our boss, at one of our, we'd be fired if we, shared we're in a private meeting.
Kenny, we'll do that. That's just great for the meeting after the meeting. But the question you're saying to Howard is, does Harry Tebow have an alcoholic ego? He doesn't have an alcoholic one. Is that what the point we're making? Or does he have an ego?
No, it's just, does he have an ego? I mean, does anybody see that? And to me, he does, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's because of my ego, and that's the problem. But,
okay, is the question then, is there a distinction between an alcoholic ego and an ego? Is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good way to put it.
Howard,
I wouldn't have come up with that, but yeah.
Howard, we're putting you up on the spot there. What do you reckon, Howard?
Well, a couple things. First of all, Tebow jokes about his own ego in one of his talks before AA, and says, "I don't think my ego is sufficiently reduced by that introduction." And it was Bill W. who was introducing him. So there's that. I think he did have, my opinion is he had an ego, but also he did make a distinction between the alcoholic ego and a healthy ego. And he talked about the infantile ego. And personally, I don't think this is, specific to alcoholics. I think it shows up in us in pure culture, like he said. I think that in alcoholic after alcoholic, so it's a pattern that he noticed in alcoholics. And anyone is, prey to grandiosity, defiance, omnipotence, being in a hurry, and not accepting frustration. That's a human condition, but it's the degree to which we have it that leads to the pathology of alcoholism, the drink and all the other terrible life decisions that I made around my alcoholic ego and thinking. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure he does a couple of times address in joking passing his own ego, but I think we can assume that he did have an ego, and that whether it was infantile or not, the answer is probably yes.
So when Wilson said the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, he's talking about
right.
The act of alcoholic is an extreme. Well, go from my own experience. I'm not an extreme example, I'd like to think, of self-will run right today, because I turn my will over most of the time. We have to say, Rob, that's not right, or Rib, if someone calls it down. Rob, thank you. We have Australian people with us as well tonight. Go ahead. Sorry, go on. Yes. No. Yeah.
Note on that. He's making this distinction between the technical psychiatric definition of ego, which is the three-part psychodynamics that everyone has. An ego in Freudian psychology is the balancing force between the other two extremes of the psyche. So from his point of view, from Tebow's point of view, that would be a healthy ego at work, an adult ego. So I think he endorses the idea of a healthy ego by implication there. Okay.
The ambassador, if you like. Is that an ambassador or someone turning his will over? Is that a result of turning your will over? Would that be a healthy ego?
What he says is can be no compromise with the infantile ego. So the surrender is designed to get rid of that ego, but it doesn't mean that you're ego-less. You're infantile ego-less.
I love it. In other
words, you've grown up, right? Emotionally.
My own experience tells me that, but we're using language that we mightn't be used to in a meeting, right? We're all talking from our own experience, haven't had a spiritual awakening, character change sufficient. But I have a new ego, but I like it as I turn it over to my higher power now. Whereas when I was drinking, it was self-will run riot, or self-sufficient, or reliant on self, or. Mm-hmm. Whereas now, I like to think I'm trying to turn it over to the Father, who presides over us all. I like to think so, Howard. But we got a lot of people jumping in here, and I'm going to say this is great because we're alcoholic and we do like a good discussion. So Bonnie's got a beautiful picture of a little bird up there. Bonnie, can you show us who you are, please? There you go. Hello, Bonnie.
Hi there. I am an alcoholic named Bonnie, and thank you, Howard, for what you presented tonight. I always love hearing this information. Now, is this a question portion or comment portion?
We go with either at this point, Bonnie. It's just kind of yep.
Okay. Well, I think for me in hearing this information for the first maybe 10 times, there was definitely resistance from my ego, from my alcoholic, immature, always in a hurry, can't stand the word no ego. And I had to remember that when I say, I know, that's my ego. If I'm thinking I already know this information, I'm coming in with a closed mind. I'm not going to hear the bottom of what really is going on here. And the important things for me is this ego, the recuperative power of this ego. It's daily. It can recuperate multiple times during a day. I love how Howard said it's the awareness. And that's the beauty in 10 and 11. I have to stay aware of what's going on inside my mind, because that's where my life is lived, in my mind, not how I see it, but how I think about what's going on. And so that was important for me to understand when Tebow starts talking about these underlying feeling states, this character structure, the changes that need to happen. And it's difficult to look at. My alcoholism will balk at this over and over again. But once I see it, and I can see it in me, not in you, that's when the change happens. And it's just like the book says, even though you scoff, may you continue to pray. Please keep just looking at it and come into it with an open mind that it's possible I haven't had an effective surrender against my disease. And that just was a game changer for me. So, I just love this information. I've done it. I believe in it. It works. Just like I don't scoff anymore because I'm like the scientist. I try again and again, always with the open mind. And, so anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Lovely, Bonnie. Howard, would you like to come in?
Well, yeah, Bonnie and I both belong to a fellowship that emphasizes that alcoholism is a mind-powered disease, and that it's about our thinking. It's about the way I look at the world, and so we look at Tebow for a roadmap, a beginning at looking at what's really going on under the hood, and. I wouldn't adopt this stuff if it didn't make sense to me. It really does. I mean, I recognize those ego factors. I mean, I know that I want what I want when I want it. I know that I want, now, please, and not so please, just now, and et cetera. I identify with what Tebow said. But I also think the practice of AA can be seen as a treatment for this aberrant thinking, that it's a matter of disciplining my thought processes and building a new character away from the way I used to think, and having a character that thinks about other people once in a while. That doesn't think it's the center of the universe. That's the critical thing for a higher power for me, is that I'm not at the center, and if I'm not at the center, I can back away and I can see what I'm doing. God helps me to see what I'm doing. This idea of God consciousness. Okay. Whatever that may be for you.
Okay. What's the fellowship you were speaking about there that you and Bonnie belong to?
Now, and there's a website, primetimeisnow.com.
Prime time. We put that in the chat. We'll try and find that and we'll get that information. Bonnie, maybe you could do that if you can. Put that information. People were asking me what's that information. Thank you for that. Oh, there you go. Tebow mentions having a hump. There you go. Bonnie's putting stuff in the chat. Eddie, yeah, you finished, Howard? Sorry, yeah. The point was made. Eddie. We're going back to Blighty. We're going Eddie W.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. It's late evening over here. Anyway, or good afternoon, wherever you may be. Yeah. I've done a little bit of Harry Tebow stuff before with Craig from Prime Time. So, I understand a little bit about it. But would you, my question is if if I don't get rid of my, like, for me, what it is, my ego, it separates me from you guys, yeah, and it brings me out in my selfishness. So when I'm separated from you guys, yeah, and it's just all about me, that blocks me off from my God, yeah, or my understanding of God, yeah, and I become God. So, the question, I think, what my question is like, once my ego's been deflated, would you say it's an easier passage to connect with your understanding of your higher power?
Yeah, right. It's actually, it's sort of back and forth. It's like the connection allows me to reduce the ego too. It's like, it's one and the same thing. It's all one action. It's the ability to stand back.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm kind of grateful for Dr. Tiebout, because do you think Bill Wilson would have put anything in even the 12 and 12 if he hadn't been influenced by Harry Tiebout about the ego?
Well, I'm sure Bill had plenty of experience outside of his connections with Dr. Tiebout, but I believe from the long association of Dr. Tiebout, and there may have been political things with the board later. He served on the board until his death in 1966, so he was still in. And we have a late recording of his where he was very much in favor in an AA convention, given a fulsome introduction and expounding his theories, and everybody was pretty much. So anyway, I think that AA's attitude in the 50s and the 60s towards Tiebout was very benign, nice. You know, they liked him. So I think probably Bill Wilson, and I'm totally speculating, probably Bill Wilson used Tiebout's ideas in generating the 12 by 12, but I can't give you chapter and verse, and I don't know for sure.
Thank you, Eddie W. So that website again for anyone listening who gets a chance to listen to this is primetimeisnow.com. So if you just go put that into your search engine, primetimeisnow.com. And we're going to Gloria C. How wonderful to see Gloria. Hello, Gloria.
Hi there, David. Thank you so much for sharing. And Howard, thank you for sharing. I think we're getting a little mixed up with the terminology. I believe everyone has an ego. Some of it is overdeveloped and can be very annoying to others, but we all have a sense of self. I get into trouble when my id is predominating. That's a little kid in me that acts like a 2-year-old. And His Majesty the baby, that's all id. It's not ego, it's id. So I think the term, and also I was thinking about Tiebout and his place in AA history, and it would have been when his subjects, in other words, Bill and so forth, were newly sober. And by newly sober, excuse me for saying this, would be the first 20 years or so. Usually people lose a lot of that id by the time they hit about 30. Not everybody. Some people have it their whole dryness or sobriety, whatever you want to call it. So anyway, I was thinking of the, this is 40 and, obviously, and, we're supposed to have the ego, the superego, and the id. But let's not forget that id. It is a very big factor in how we respond. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
That's a nice 2 cents. Come on, Howard. Yeah.
Well, I think that whatever terms you want to use, the recognition of the infantile aspects of my consciousness now, right now, is that, I have these factors at work, grandiosity, whether you locate them in the id or the ego or whatever, they're a fact. They're working in my life, and they continue to work in my life even after I get a lot better. And the ego can reassert itself. I can go back to my old way of thinking, and that's a powerful and very important part of Thibault's message. Is that, and like I said, I think it's old wiring. It's my ego will come up. I will think that you don't love me. I will think that I'm going to lose something that I want. I will think that I got something to lose, or I got, there's some sort of threat, and it touches me with fear, and that's an emotional button on my ego, and the ego responds. My muscle comes up, and I say, "Oh no, you don't." And often that will come along with anger as a response to cover up the fear. So this happens like a reflex. It's not something I have conscious control over. So what I need is I got to pay attention to my gut, and when my gut goes, what is wrong? What's going on? That for me is a key. I get butterflies. I get a bad feeling in my stomach. Something's up. Something's wrong. What's up? God, please help me understand what's going on. And that prayer gets answered because, I've done a lot of work. I understand the tricks I get up to, and it's usually pretty clear what's really up. And I can then ask for help in modifying the thought and thinking differently. So that's my process around it. But whatever you call it, id, ego, superego, those elements are in place.
So remember, we deal with alcohol. If we substitute ego in there, remember we deal with the ego, cunning, baffling, and powerful. I think that works a treat for me too.
Somebody at our fellowship, I think it may have been Bob Anderson, who founded the format that we use, said that alcohol and ego are conjoined twins. Alcoholism.
That works for me. I buy into that on someone think gives me something else. That works for me. I like that. Controlling twins. I'll be using that Hazel on someone soon. There's an Hazel. Come on, Hazel, jump in now.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to.
Have you got controlling twins?
Irregardless of your theoretical foundations, what credit, if you will, do you give to society's overall idea of what a person should be that shapes your opinion? You follow me?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I'm a product of my society. My early life was marked by defiance and rebellion against societal norms. I'm a child of the 60s. It was a time of rebellion, and particularly against religion. I figured the entire Catholic Church was set up to control me alone, and the whole point was to keep me from having fun or doing what I want. And when I joined AA, and I realized what a narcissistic position that was, and I had difficulty with religion, partly because of my a large part because of my defiance and rebelliousness, but a lot had to do with intellectual objections, and I had to construct a concept of a higher power that it could work for me, and it ended up not matching the one I grew up with. And I found that my process in the fourth and the fifth step was a moral search for the truth of what my behavior had been, my thinking had been. And in that process, I constructed a morality that I could live with. And I saw for myself what some things that the society had tried to shove down my throat. So I thought were actually common sense. Some things I didn't. Some things I didn't accept. So what I did is I created a personal code of morality. And that was informed by a spiritual experience. So that led me to a philosophy of life and an approach to living that I could live with, that I could accept. And that allowed me to go further in AA. That allowed me to, because the whole thing was, I had a lot of shame. I was like, my God, I had the kind of ego that was either up and in your face or it was down. I'm the worst piece of caca in the world, et cetera, et cetera. So I had a lot of defensiveness around the things, my character defects, and I had to accept them as defects and come up with something as an alternative. And, I built a morality that is certainly shaped by my upbringing, and by the traditions that society imposes, but it is mine, and mine alone. So that's,
do you find
sorry, I should wait. I need to qualify that, that it's really through my higher power that I arrived at this. So it's not mine and mine alone. That's very egocentric talk. So go ahead.
Do you find that you are impacted by subliminal messages from society at large?
Well, it's hard to say. That'd be an unconscious process.
So if it's okay, Howard, we go into that after the meeting. That's a very good question. We can start with that if you want to stick around after the meeting. It's a big broad one. Let's go to Billy. We close with Billy Van, if that's okay, this section, because we're going to get really deep into stuff, I'm sure. Billy, good to have you here, sir.
Thank you. No, it was more a comment than question. Although here's the little I knew about Tiebout, and my admiration for him was that he certainly went against the grain of most psychiatric professionals, and even to this day, I believe, in that they said if we could figure out what's wrong with this guy, then maybe we can stop his drinking, which was in my mind, kind of like not a conflict, but it was like AA says, no, if you stop drinking first, then you'll be able to figure out what's wrong with you. In other words, don't try to cure the personality or the thoughts or any of that first. Stop drinking. And I will tell you, that's what worked for me. And I have had to do a lot of work not to overthink this. I don't want to be thinking about this. I've been sober. I'll be sober next month, 45 years.
Nice.
And how I did it was very simply, I got sober on the strength of my identification with my other alcoholics. That's it. And I have not drank one day at a time, and I've tried not to think about when a thought of a drink came to me. I can't control that thought. I can only control what I do with that thought, what action I take. And I've learned not to judge myself anymore. And it took a lot of practice not to judge myself by how I'm thinking or how I'm even feeling, but what are my actions? What am I doing? And my whole awakening has been experiential. I didn't drink. I didn't drink. And it took, maybe I had to be battered and bludgeoned, like they said, for a number of years, but it worked. Now I've arrived at this point where I'm like stupid happy. I'm happy for little or no reason. Why? Because I'm sober and I have a really, really great life. And Howard, I don't believe in God. I have done this without a God consciousness or whatever you want to say. I'm one of those people that don't believe in God and have stayed sober for a very long time. I don't know how that works. You said, how do they work? How do people do that? You asked, part of your thing was, I don't know how they do that. Well, I'll tell you how they do that. They do it by not drinking one day at a time. At least that's how I've done it, So thank you very much. I like Thibault. I think he was right on, man, for being a psychiatrist. Certainly the ones that I met in jails and institutions weren't. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy. And we're going to give the last word to Howard, and then we close it and we come back to have the meeting after the meeting.
Okay,
Howard.
So Thibault, early on especially, really was impressed by the ability of AA to get the plug in the jug. Nobody was getting that done. And he wrote a whole paper about treating the symptoms of the disease, where the symptoms was the drinking. And that he recommended, in fact, stated it was really important that you had to stop drinking first. And so he was very much in line with what you're saying. As far as the God thing goes, more power to you. I'm totally happy whoever's got an accommodation with this thing that works.
Brilliant stuff. Let's hear it one more time for Howard, who's put in a nice presentation for us tonight for Harry, the alcoholic ego. Thibault and the alcoholic ego.
Thanks, Howard. Got a great perspective.
Thank you all.
Howard.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Howard. Thank you, Howard.
Brilliant stuff. And Howard, can you lead us out in a manner of your choosing, whichever suits you, and we'll abide by that. Thank you, Howard.
Okay, so in this semi-secular environment, I will choose the Serenity Prayer. Grant me the serenity.
Serenity to accept the things I cannot change.
To accept things I cannot change.
Courage to change things I can.
And
wisdom to know the difference. There you go. Well, fantastic. I really enjoyed that. We're going to have a meeting after the meeting. If you want to stick around, that's great. I'm going to stop this recording